So the Mueller investigation just dropped, and the general consensus appears to be, at least among liberals, not so much fire, not so much heat this time around. Oh, you should have seen the CNN MSNBC meltdown. It was hilarious. It's great. As much as I love to see Rachel Maddow's gears, the sparks start to go off in her head and the robots' heads start falling off and shit, as great as that is, I'm going to be upfront about my bias. I want to see Trump go down for something. And it's not even because I particularly hate Trump that much. I don't really despise him. In fact, what the shit he says, like the reason why the establishment hates him is actually why I like him. He just says grab him by the pussy or whatever the fuck he wants. That's not a good example. I wouldn't say that. But he just says whatever the fuck comes to his head, and there's a certain admirable quality about that we desperately need on the left. That is definitely what the left needs. It needs more humor. It needs more comedy. It needs to get back into that like free speech against all odds mode. That is what they're so desperately missing. But I actually agree with the people who want to see him usurped or impeached from power. I know there's a 0% chance it's going to happen, but hear me out. When you impeach this president, if you believe in the downfall of the government in its current form, then to some degree you have to be for the downfall of certain positions of power. And the president just happens to be one of the most powerful, if not the most powerful. Definitely the most powerful in terms of what he has command over. And that was only expanded by the Bush-Dick Cheney administration. The idea of the unilateral executive is what Dick Cheney expanded on, and that's why Obama and Trump have had the amount of power they have now over foreign policy. So it's clear that in our current system, the president has so much more power than the average citizen. Not only that he has infinitely more protection. If he commits a crime, the next president can pardon him. That's what happened with Richard Nixon. That's why he was allowed to resign, because he was guaranteed that pardon, pretty much. And ever since then, the Republicans have been blatantly against transparency. Here are a few things that bother me. Now, the fact of the matter is, like I said, there's a 0% chance he's going to get impeached, unless some real bombshell hits that we weren't expecting. But the summary of the Mueller report essentially says that while there's nothing conclusive about it, there's nothing that you can indict him on, that doesn't mean he's completely exonerated. And MSNBC and CNN will speculate on that second part of the sentence for ages and ages and ages in an attempt to keep pushing their conspiracy. And as far as the Russia meddling goes, I've always said from the beginning of this bullshit, when they were accusing Russia, it's like, no, it's Hillary's fault 100%. It had nothing to do with Russia. If you think the American people aren't stupid enough to elect a total lying sack of shit for president, and you got another thing coming. I have total faith in the stupidity of the American people to fuck up on their own. And I mean, if you go by the popular vote, which doesn't even matter, then essentially you have to recognize that the whole voting system was rigged from the start. People always say, oh, Russia rigged our election. No, stupid. The founding fathers rigged it in 1770, whatever the fuck year it was, whenever that shitty electoral college was invented. Please correct me on that in the comments. But, we live in a country where a black man who was falsely accused of rape is exonerated after 36 years of incarceration. 36 years. And they couldn't figure out that he was fucking innocent. Meanwhile, the president can snap his fingers and say, okay, we're going to kill thousands of innocent civilians over in the desert with the push of a button. And he faces no consequences. Meanwhile, you can't even drive around with a fucking expired license plate. That's the country you live in. So, when you take down the president for reasons either legal or ethical or even anarchy, where the citizens say, fuck you, we don't like you, you're out of here. If we had a system like that, then you would send a clear message to every president who comes after Trump, and you would be saying the president is not untouchable. Nobody's above the law, or the law at least as the majority perceive it. So I'm for democracy in that sense. I think we need a little refresher. I understand the problems with direct democracy. It doesn't always work. Sometimes there's mob rule. Like I don't like we've seen it on Twitter where people end up fighting against their own interest because they don't want to be seen as different. They don't want to upset the crowd. They don't want to upset the majority. And that's really unfortunate. But right now, I think the problem facing us, at least in the government, is far greater than this report makes it out to be and the way people are responding to it. Report. I totally agree with the people who say release the full report because number one is obvious. If you got nothing to hide, just release the fucking thing, all right? If you got nothing to hide, you would fucking release it. The fact that you're not, or maybe you will down the line and maybe you'll prove me wrong. I hope they do. But the longer they wait on that, the more suspicion you're going to arouse. People are going to start asking questions, and they should. They have every fucking right to see that. But today, Mitch McConnell, this fucking asshole, who might be the worst human being on earth as far as I'm concerned, he's such a dick. He literally cock-blocked this measure to get them to release the full document. Look, even on the Democrats' worst day, the Republicans have always been vehemently against transparency and whistleblowers. They wanted to throw Chelsea Manning in jail, and Edward Snowden. They were the ones leading that cause. You're a threat to national security. It's such bullshit. No, you're not. It's pretty clear there is no center to that issue. You're either with the government or you're against the government on the issue of whether you think whistleblowers should be listened to or whether they should be imprisoned. And I think clearly there's a reason for their existence. It is to expose corruption. So that makes me wonder what Mitch McConnell has to hide as well. What they all have to hide. If you investigate Trump for anything, I admit it's not a permanent solution to all of our problems. I'm not saying that, but I think it could be an effective temporary solution. It wouldn't raise our standard of living or end corruption entirely, but it could open the door to further expose of our elected officials. Real crackdowns that we wanted, the unveiling of Wall Street ties, big oil money, child sex rings, Alex Jones would get a kick out of that, etc., etc. But they're still not going to get him on collusion or anything like that. If you still buy into the CNN fantasy of Trump walking away in handcuffs, sorry, you're going to be disappointed by the end of his first term, and it'll hopefully be his last term. When people talk about the Attorney General, William Barr, being Trump's right-hand man, and the summary could be perverted somehow and not represent the full Mueller document, there is some truth to the argument because some people will say, well, if Mueller disagreed with anything in that statement, he would come out and say it. But I'm not that sure about that, to be honest. I'm not sure whose side any of these people are on. As far as I'm concerned, the Democrats and the Republicans are on the same fucking side. And that's why the Democrats so routinely fuck up in their public relations. That's why they chose Hillary. It's because their donors secretly wanted a guy like Trump. They wanted Hillary, don't get me wrong. But they would gladly risk having Trump instead because his tax policy is so similar, because he may say things that they find inappropriate or offensive. But in the end, the rich, his policy is completely right up their alley. Privatize everything, privatize schools. He's playing Monopoly. It's perfect. Other than the fact that he's an asshole. That's the only thing they don't like about him. I mean, this isn't the 1960s, all right? I know I might get banned for saying this, but imagine okay, not saying I'm for this. Suppose Trump was, I'm going to say offed, all right? Would anybody give a shit? Obviously, his supporters might give a shit, but would you really go crying about it? Like, this ain't Kennedy. This is not a uniting figure, you know? We live in a fucked up world, cynical world. I tell you, if Democrats investigated a murder and they saw the guy standing in the kitchen with a bloody knife in his hand over an entire family that he just killed, if they investigated that shit, I'm sure they could find a way to get it to backfire on them. They are that sloppy. They are that incompetent. Yeah, but those are my thoughts on that. I'll be back with more content soon, guys. Cheers. This is Rage Win. Until next time, Rage to the motherfucking win.